Hello, and thank you so much for listening to Modern Chocolate Christians. You can find us at www.modernchocolatechristians.com. Okay, before we get started, let's begin with the Bible verse for this message. It is 2 Corinthians 6:19, and I'm going to read it to you from a variety of different versions of the Bible. I'm going to start with the New King James Version. Do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship has righteousness with darkness? And what communion has light with darkness? Let's go to the King James Version. Do you know that some people believe you cannot read any other version of the Bible except for the King James Version? So for those of you who feel that way, be ye not unequally yoked together with unbelievers. For what fellowship hath righteousness with unrighteousness? And what communion hath light with darkness? I like the New Century Version of the Bible, NCV, that says, you are not the same as those who do not believe, so do not join yourselves to them. Good and bad do not belong together. Light and darkness cannot share together. So we're talking about not so clean Christian comics. I was going to call it the Christian bait and switch, because everyone I'm getting ready to mention started their rise to prominence either as a Christian or we thought they were Christians. They were doing Christian comedy, clean comedy, but now they have elevated and progressed to include profanity and to attach themselves to other, air quotes, secular comedians who use dirty cuss words. So I'm mentioning this so that if you are a new Christian or you're new to social media, you find these people and you love their comedy and you think they're Christian comics and you will have certain expectations of them. I have listened to all of these people that you see on the cover image a lot. I found them during the pandemic, like so many of you did. They rose greatly during that time, and they are still enjoying a lot of the fame and success that they found on social media during the lockdown. I appreciate their hustle. I do not have a problem with any of these. But what happened over the time that I listened to them until now is that I noticed that they began to switch, right? They began talking about things of the church, and making light of it and making fun. Because listen, traditional church is a trip. Sometimes you can't help but to mock it. The traditions and the things that people do in church, that church people do in church culture. There are things that you can make light of and make jokes of, and that is not the problem. The problem is if you are a Christian and you are expecting them to reflect a particular lifestyle, if you're expecting that they will not use certain kinds of language, if you are expecting that they are going to be totally clean and filled with the Holy Ghost, then they are not. So when you listen to them, just understand that they might talk about Christian things, but they are not opposed to expanding and broadening their horizons to talk about risque or to talk about matters using risque language. So let me get into it. Christiane Porter, love her. She does this character, Miss Charlene, who is the quintessential choir member. She is the older woman in the choir who runs the choir. You can't tell her she cannot sing. I enjoy this character. I enjoy Christiane. She is an Arkansas native. That's my home state, Arkansas. Not a problem with her skits so much, but she is currently on tour with someone called Angus Black, who is also also a comedian. Now, normally she would just go out on tour by herself, but now she has this man with her, and she seems to be very high on this man. If you look at their Instagram pages, they like each other's stuff back and forth. And sometimes you will find people in business and in your industry that you really connect with. Okay, if you go to Angus Black's Instagram page and listen to the clips of his comedy, the things that he talks about, the people he hangs out with, what he's doing on his tour. Girl, if you're doing church lady church stuff, how did you hook up with Angus Black? Because he ain't doing no kind of church man stuff. So I don't know what they do on tour together. I don't know what his particular part in her tour is. But him separately doing his comedy, oh, he is not clean. Not at all. So if you have built your platform on Christian comedy and you now connect yourself to someone who clearly does not live that lifestyle, what fellowship do you have? So now you're confusing your audience because you started out this way with your Miss Charlene character and built expectations of this character and, how your audience receives this character. And now you are switching up. You're expanding your horizons to include people who do not reflect the values of the people you have built your audience upon, right? Most of your audience are Christian women. This man does not reflect the values and expectations of a Christian woman. Just witty. Beautiful. These are gorgeous young ladies doing their thing. I'm glad to see it. She is funny. Just Witty found her on Instagram. I think she goes by Whitney LaBelle. Very funny. You might have seen her on a viral clip. She was on the Dear Future Wifey podcast, and her wig completely slipped off. And she started saying the N-word. They were talking about Jesus, talking about the Lord, and now she's talking about the N-word because the wig slipped off. It was still very funny. But if you're expecting her to be clean, don't expect her to be completely clean. Now, if you look at her Instagram page, she talks about church girl stuff, church girl dating, wanting a husband. She does very funny Bible character skits. So her whole vibe, her whole platform has been built upon a Christian church audience, Black Christian church audience. All of a sudden, she's trying out for Wild 'N Out, Nick Cannon's show Wild 'N Out. So she put up some video clips of herself in the car with this very fair-skinned comedian with really big eyes. Forgot his name, but you might know him. But I automatically recognized him as a not clean comic. He is a dirty talking comic. And she's talking about how she's auditioning for Wild 'N Out. And in the comments, people had different perspectives about that. I was one of them. How is it that you're trying out for this show that clearly has nothing to do with being clean and it has nothing to do with Christianity, but you have built yourself and build yourself as a Christian comic? Why are you hanging out with these dudes, dirty talking dudes? Why are you trying out for this show that obviously uses profanity and coarse language? Have you switched? You're confusing your audience because you have built yourself as a clean Christian comic, but now you have elevated and expanded yourself to include people who do not reflect those values. What fellowship does light have with darkness? So once again, she used the N-word. She uses coarse language at times. So do not expect her to be a completely clean comic either. Now, I am not disparaging these people at all, but just know that although they talk about church-related stuff, They don't always reflect a Christian lifestyle in the way that you think it should be reflected. Kev on Stage and his wife, Melissa Fredericks. Now, Christian bloggers have been talking about Kev on Stage for a few years now because he obviously switched. This was a church couple who listened to the church tell, the young people, don't have sex before marriage. Sex is dirty before marriage. And that caused a lot of conflict with them. They talked about it on their podcast. Melissa talks about, and she still talks about the fact that she really can't have sex right to this day. Basically, she still has trouble with sexuality. They've been married for over 15 years. They talked about that explicitly on their podcast. Again, I started listening to them during the lockdown, and I listened to them a lot. The thing about Kev on Stage is he started his platform in the church as well. Christian comedy. We're not expecting a Christian comic to cuss, but when he began that show, the socially distant comedy show, and it was unique because, he had his friends who are not necessarily Christians to be on the playbill with him, to be on the show with him. So because you built your platform on Christian comedy, he still had a large Christian audience. So they bought tickets to this virtual show, expecting that these people were going to be clean comics. They were not. He had Tony Baker, that chick Angel, these people that he associate with. They were cussing and a cussing and a cussing. I mean, dirty cussing. What's dirty cussing? MF, a F word, S word. That's dirty cussing. And so a lot of people were taken aback and shocked, and some wanted their money back because they were not expecting that from Kev on Stage. You are creating and promoting and producing this show. You have a large Christian audience, and you put on these dirty talking comics without a disclaimer. That was a problem. There was no disclaimer saying coarse language, cuss words, however you word it, will be used. Adult language, adult topics will be discussed. So a lot of people were saddened and disappointed. A lot of people who call themselves Christians were. His wife has gone on to create a podcast with her sister called Gin and Juice. They're drinking alcohol, they're cussing, they're talking about things in a risque way. So they are not representing Christian values in the way that you would expect. They are not so clean, right? So I'm not disparaging them, but when you listen to these people, yes, they built their platform, they built their riches, they built their money, they built their wealth and audience starting with Christian topics and still talk about Christian culture. But these people are not opposed to expanding their horizons to attach themselves to people and to business deals and to companies that do not represent Christianity. Country Wayne still watches skits. Now, what so many people have said in his comments, I barely watch him, but he started out clean comedy, found him during the lockdown, made me laugh, made everybody laugh. But then over the past year or so, his skits have taken on a darker turn. He's talking about drug abuse. Now, he is talking about topics that affect the Black community: domestic violence, drug abuse, murder, homicide. And a lot of people started commenting, look, I used to just watch these skits to get a laugh because Country Wayne was funny. Now you're talking about all of these dark issues. Now people are murdering people in the skits. What has happened? He has switched. So he's not clean. He says in his live shows that he's a clean comic, not a Christian comic, says that he's a clean comic. But his slogan is Jesus is popping. So when you're talking about Jesus, you expect him to be a Christian. But he will also use coarse language. The people around him use dirty curse words, right? So don't expect it to be clean. Don't expect his skits to be lighthearted and funny like they were before. They have taken on a darker, more urban, murdering tone, where people are in the streets dealing drugs. And so he is talking about drug culture in his skits now. So he said that, he used to be in them streets. So now he is talking about street life in his skits. So just be forewarned that he is not a Christian company. He says he believes in Jesus, and I'm not saying that he does not. He uses the slogan, Jesus is popping. But when you watch him in his comedy, don't be shocked if he slips in a cuss word or some sort of adult language. Tim Ross, child. Ooh, this joker right here. He used to be a pastor. I say used to because he no longer pastors a church. I listened to his podcast, and, he had an interesting story, right? And he was a victim in a lot of ways of church culture. When I say church culture, I believe in Jesus. I believe in the Lord. I'm not playing church games and church politics with you. I'm not a churchy person, right? Never have been. So I respect the church and go into church because the Bible says do not forsake the fellowship of believers. But I'm not going to play with people in the church. So I am very separate from churchy church folk people who are highly hypocritical. So he came up in that system where he was being taught by a bunch of hypocrites. So yes, now he is very critical of that culture. Okay, I'm with it. I was listening to him. He uses words like a-hole, talking about genitalia, very coarse language, okay, in his podcast. He seems to have switched. Well, he addressed that with people, right? Because he was really talking, just words that you don't expect a Christian pastor to use. He addressed that in a podcast where he said, this is not a Christian podcast. It's called The Basement. He said in his own words, The Basement is not a Christian podcast. It reflects his personality, and his personality, he still cusses. Okay. After almost 30 years of being a pastor, he still cusses. He will use language of the culture that is dirty, that is adult, that is coarse. This joker is under fire. I call him a joker because he got up at Mike Todd's church and said Jesus was his favorite stripper. Blasphemy. That is so disrespectful. People are treating Christianity like it is not a holy, spiritual, faith-based system of lifestyle. We worship a holy God. The fact that you could fix your mouth to say Jesus was your favorite stripper, you are automatically reprobate. Just say you're not a Christian without saying you're not a Christian. You are no longer with us. Like it says in the book of Acts, there are many who started with the disciples who no longer are with the disciples. But the problem was those people who left the disciples and left Jesus were still out there teaching and preaching. It's the same today. So Tim Ross is still out here talking to people in the church, still talking to people who call themselves Christians, but now he's saying, well, you can't basically, it's just the haters, these overly judgmental Christians, who are coming at me and telling me this and telling me that. Listen, brother, I don't care what you say. Keep all that to yourself, right? I have listened to you. I have heard you talking dirty. You admit that you will talk dirty. And he even said in that podcast, the one titled, This Is Not a Christian Podcast, he said, I know I'm going to lose a lot of followers, so that means you're just not for me. Right. So I unfollowed him. Basically, you are not for me if you do not see a problem with using profanity. But you are a former Christian pastor who is still talking to Christian people, but you gotta now. So these people have built themselves upon Christian platforms. Their audience They built their audience on Christian people, but they are not so clean. Oh, another thing about Country Wayne, he produced a movie, Gutter, just cussing for no reason, cussing. So you're saying Jesus is popping, which Jesus, is the hallmark of the Christian faith. So now we're assuming you are a Christian. You don't really curse in your comedy live. But he produced a movie that came out on Valentine's Day, 2023. He's talking about dirty sex, cussing. He also is associated with people like Mike Bless and Rolanda, who in their natural lives, they just cuss. They do not call themselves Christians. They do not call themselves clean. But Country Wayne started out that way. So we are expecting him to be a clean Christian comic. But he has again aligned himself with people who are not. So when you watch his skits now, when you watch his little movie, it is dirty, it is foul. I personally cannot handle that level of carnality. The way I am built now in my spiritual walk, I don't want to hear any cussing. So that means I don't really watch a lot of stuff. And people will sneak cussing in on me. So I was listening to all of these people because I'm like, okay, they're clean enough for me to listen to. It's churchy, churchy kind of comedy, not a problem. But then they switched up to where they're cussing and they're using foul, coarse language. I am a teacher for real teacher, not just Sunday school teacher, not just teacher in the church, not just spiritual teacher. Professional teacher. I have substituted K through 12 for a number of years. For like the last 10 years, I taught in colleges and universities. I have literally taught people from babies to like 80 and 90-year-olds. I literally had like 80 and 90-year-olds in my college classes. So I have taught everybody. As a teacher, you will never hear me talking gutter, talking like you are my friend, like I'm on the corner with you, because I'm just trying to keep it real. I'm not trying to keep it that real. I'm not trying to associate with you at your level, because here's what people want. People want to be brought up. They don't want you to meet them at their level and keep them there. They want to come up. When people are listening to Christian comics, they still want to be uplifted in some way. Yes, they want to be entertained, but they still want to be uplifted. Don't meet me at the gutter and try to keep me in the gutter and try to convince me that it's okay, because it is not. So when you build yourself on Christian audiences, there is a certain expectation, and you know what that expectation is. And they met it in the beginning, that you're not going to curse, that you're not going to be dirty, that my kids can listen to you. Your children, some of you allow your children, to talk dirty. And so I'm going to say this, with a caveat. If you're expecting them to be totally clean to a point where your children can listen to them, they are not. I still find them very funny. They are very entertaining. Some of them, I do not listen to Kev on Stage anymore. I do not listen to Tim Ross. Country Wayne, I'm in and out, but I know where he is now, right? I know where his skits are now. So if I don't feel like watching that mess, I'm not going to watch it. Christiane Porter, I just listened to her skits online when it's just her. I have not, gone to her live show and seen what this guy, Angus Black, brings to her show. But just be warned. Now, in your Christian walk with God, when you do business with people, let's go back to 2 Corinthians 6:14. I read it in different versions. Let me find another version. Here's a New Living Translation, NLT. Don't team up with those who are unbelievers. How can righteousness be a partner with wickedness? How can light live with darkness? When you hook up with people in this way, don't expect that these people, these non-Christian, non-clean comics, are going to all of a sudden turn your way and be clean and want to know your God. That is not what is going to happen. The clean Christian comic is going to become dirty, like Kev on Stage. He started hanging out, or these are his friends. He allowed himself to do business with, the Tony Bakers and the That Chick Angel. They are not clean at all. So he got to the point where he started talking dirty and nasty in his live comedy. And that is not what he built his business on. 1 Corinthians 15:33. Do not be deceived. Evil company corrupts good habits. When you do business with secular people, do not expect that all of a sudden they're going to want to know your God. You need to go into that partnership knowing that things are going to come up that do not fit your value system. How are you going to handle it? The Bible warns you not to partner with these people. But if you do, you are not going to come out on the victorious end all the time. Basically, they're going to drag you through it, okay? Same thing with relationships. Let's say that Christianity Porter had a relationship with this guy, Angus Black. She is saved and a Christian comic. He does not reflect that. Yes, sometimes you do just fall for people because people are people, people are fantastic. I love creative people as well. So what woman has not gone out with the bad boy, okay? What church girl has not gone out with somebody who is not a part of the church? Fine. But they will drag you to their habits, into their environment, into their darker thinking and way of life. They are not all of a sudden wanting to be saved, right? And wanting to be the kind of light and be the kind of clean comic that you are. It does not happen that way. So just be, forewarned that these people are great. They're entertaining. They have a Christian audience. They have built themselves on a Christian platform, but they are not necessarily clean. They are not the kind of Christian you think they should be. One young lady on YouTube called it the Broadway Christianity. People don't want to go through the eye of the needle. They don't want to go to the narrow way that Jesus said you got to go to be with him. I call it gutter Christianity, where these people who call themselves Christians or who talk to Christian audiences are just filled with carnality. What does that mean? Drinking, smoking, cussing, clubbing. They are all right with it. And Jackie Hill Perry said it in a really good way. She said, Christians are so trying to be non-judgmental to the point where you are now profane. You are allowing all kinds of junk in your life because you don't want people to think you're not cool. You're not that kind of Christian. You're not going to, and I personally am not going to tell people you're going to hell. That's not my charge. I don't have anything against underrepresented groups. I'm not the kind of person, it is not in my heart, to be offensive to people, to not welcome people or embrace people, no matter their race, their culture, their lifestyle. I do embrace people because God loves people and the love of God is in my heart. I do not have to participate in what they participate in. I do not have to beat people over the head with the Bible. But by the way I speak and by the way I live, people will begin to ask me. And when people ask me, I will tell them. I will begin to witness to them. So that's where I am, the kind of Christian that I am. But I'm not going to go so far overboard trying to let people know that, I openly welcome people and embrace people to the point where I am clearly dipping into blasphemy, clearly crossing the line so hard that you can no longer say it's Christianity. That's Tim Ross. Crossed the line so hard. He might as well just say he is not a Christian. He already said his podcast was not a Christian podcast. So just believe him. Where he is right now is not where he started. Where these people are, where these comics are right now It's not where they started. So it's all right. A lot of you don't mind the cuss words. I personally can't listen to all that cussing. Listen to my previous messages about the energy that curse words attract, about the demons that cursing attracts and what it leads to. All right, so very good. Again, find us at www.mcwwisdom.com, or you can type in modernchocolatechristians.com. On that website, you can find all about who we are, all of what we do, books, online courses, audio, podcasts, all of that. That is the hub. May the Lord bless you and keep you. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you in the next episode.